What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of today's episode, where we're going to dive into the topic of therapist anxiety. And particularly, I'm going to share one mindset shift that I think really helped me turn the corner when it came to my own anxiety in this profession. In the Venn diagram of where therapists and anxiety overlap, I think the overlap is a little bit more significant than I initially would have expected when I joined this field. So I thought we might spend a little bit of time with it. And I'll say I used to identify as an anxious therapist. I mean, we went all the way into the anxiety because I suffered from really severe panic disorder in high school. And I know the neural pathways are just available to me at all times. So my life is, making sure I don't just repeatedly go down the default carved out anxiety neural pathway. So it makes sense to me that, as I entered the field, as a very young person in my early 20s and with a predisposition towards anxiety, of course I was going to feel anxious. But I had thought that it was kind of a me thing, and I've learned over the years that I'm not the only one. But even though I entered this field with a whole lot of anxiety just in general as a person, but also about being a therapist, I don't necessarily feel that way very often, if at all, anymore. And as I reflect, there's definitely a lot of variables that combine together to help reduce my anxiety, both in general and as a therapist. But specifically when it comes to my therapist-related anxiety, I think there was one mindset shift that really helped me turn that corner. So I thought I'd share that with you here today. If I could boil down that anxiety that I used to really carry with me in those early days into its sort of most pure essence, it all connected back to this fear that I didn't know what I was doing as a therapist. I somehow thought that I needed to immediately know what I was doing from day one in grad school, which is silly because you go to grad school to learn how to be a therapist. So theoretically, you don't totally know what you're doing at all when you start grad school. But nonetheless, that was my mindset. And I thought that at some point I would arrive at a place where I would know everything there is about being a therapist. I would be an expert in everything, which I don't know where I came up with that mindset. I don't think anyone handed it to me, but I sure hung on to it. Now looking back at that, I realized that was just unrealistic from day one. I was never going to be an expert in everything therapy related, but that set me up for a very anxious undertaking as I entered this field. Now, I was able to let go of this idea relatively early on that I would someday be an expert in everything therapist related, but I did still for quite a while hang on to this idea that I needed to be really good at pretty much most therapy-related things. I don't know how much of that is a relic from growing up in a narcissistic household and seeing that mindset modeled for me, or if that's just because I was 21 when I started grad school, and that's a very 21-year-old experience to have, or how much of it is because I had panic disorder in high school and I just needed to be perfect. Okay, we could psychoanalyze me all day long. Maybe we won't trail too much further down that path for today, at least. But I know I'm not the only one who is entering the field carrying this mindset, or maybe you've been in the field for a long time and you still have this mindset, this pressure that you need to be really on top of everything. And there was a mindset shift that started to enter in for me at some point in my first few years after being licensed that I have found immensely helpful. Not only because it's all but eliminated my therapist-related anxiety, but it's also, I think, helped me be a much better therapist. So I'm sharing the mindset shift with you all here because I'm assuming I'm not the only one. And hopefully this is helpful for some of you. So here's the mindset shift that changed everything for me. I moved away from believing that I needed to know exactly what I was doing at all times and shifted towards a belief that much of the time, I'm not really going to know a lot about what I'm doing. I used to hear people say phrases like that and honestly judge them for it. So, if you're feeling that way, hearing me say that, then I see you. I've been there. Because I used to think we should be competent. We should know exactly what we're doing. And so if you're admitting that you don't know exactly what you're doing at all times, are you incompetent? And that was the pressure that made me hold on to this belief that made me feel so much anxiety. But let me clarify. I don't believe that we should have a self-deprecating or, diminishing perspective of ourselves, but rather embrace this mindset that we are always learning, always discovering something new. Even if we have quite a bit of knowledge, even expertise in a particular area, there will always be moments where we miss something or we just kind of had the wrong perspective, or tweaking it for this particular client would make all the difference. So this is something I want to make clear with this mindset shift, that embracing that we don't know everything not only helps reduce anxiety, it also helps us become more effective clinicians. Because if we embrace the truth that we don't know everything, then the door is wide open for us to constantly learn new things, adapt, adjust. It equalizes the therapeutic relationship because we can come in knowing that we have quite a bit of knowledge, quite a bit of skills. We are a great clinician, and we may need to adapt and adjust based on each of our individual clients' needs. We've never fully arrived and learned everything there is to learn. So yay, we can always grow. We can always become more and more competent. I wanted to make that part clear because I don't want it to sound like, okay, just embrace that you don't know what you're doing and just give up. Just screw it. What the heck? I don't know what I'm doing anyway, so I'm not even gonna try. But the opposite, because when we think we actually know everything there is to know, that's when we become complacent. That's when we stop challenging ourselves to look at things from different perspectives, grow, learn, etc. So stay curious, keep competence as the highest priority, but assume that in the moment, you may not know what you're doing, and that's totally normal. Anxiety has a way of being able to creep into pretty much everything, but there's also a few scenarios where it seems to pop up most frequently for therapists. For me, in those early days, for some reason, the fear that took up way too much real estate in my brain was that I would arrive to a session with a client and they would bring up some new concern, presenting issue that I was just therapeutically completely unfamiliar with. And I was terrified, that would be devastating. And so I compensated or attempted to compensate for it by trying to stay on top of every single little bit of information I could possibly stay on top of clinically, making sure I was familiar with every diagnosis out there and knowing exactly how to treat all of the nuanced ways that these diagnoses could present, which, yes, we should be familiar with the diagnoses and the ways they should present. But honestly, for me, the way it manifested was I'd have that mindset so loud that it then became more difficult to just be with my clients. I would start to have this nightmare fear unlock in the middle of session where I'd go, wait a minute, that client is starting to talk about this. Uh-oh, are they bringing up a new clinical concern? And is it something I've read about recently? Oh no, what did I read about? Okay, is that maybe this obscure form of OCD that I read about a long time ago? And it's been a while. Shoot, what were the diagnostic criteria of that? Meanwhile, my client is just telling me something. And instead of just curiously listening and being present to them, I'm busy over here playing this soundtrack in the back of my mind about oh no, what if I don't know what to do with this new presenting thing? Now, I know some of you are thinking, wait, Marie, you should be on top of all of the diagnoses. You don't want to just be out of the loop. Yes. But let me share now with my new mindset of assuming that I don't know and being okay. Here's how the same moment would play out. Let's say I'm meeting with the client, they're presenting some information in a session that is sounding like a potential diagnosis that we haven't touched on yet, maybe I haven't read about lately. And how I respond to it now in session is I just kind of clock it in my mind and I think, oh, that's a little flag. Let me make sure I make note of this flag. I'm going to go after session and read up on this thing because I think there might be something flagging there. And then I might just leave it. But if it looks like as the session goes on that there is a sort of greater priority around whatever this concern is that I'm feeling really not so familiar with, then I tell my client that. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine telling your client that there's something that you don't know? In those early days, telling my client that I didn't know something that was very much, a therapeutic thing. It's not like, oh, I haven't seen that TV show before, but it's like, I think you might be flagging something that's really diagnostically important, but I kind of don't remember. So I need to check and stuff. That just felt so incompetent, but I've really shifted my mindset now. So now it sounds a lot more like, hey, I noticed you were bringing up X, Y, and Z today. Those are some topics we haven't really touched on a whole lot. And as I hear you talk about them, they sound really important to me. And I have to be honest, there's some aspects of what you're bringing up that are a little bit more in my periphery. I haven't been as closely tied to those lately. So would you mind if between now and next time I refamiliarize myself with that, and I might have some updates for you next time we meet? Is that okay? The first time I ever said something in that realm of I don't know this clinical thing, I'm going to go check on it and come back next time, was so freeing for me, because I had spent so long being terrified of that moment, and then realizing just being honest with my clients and saying, I don't know, I'm not as familiar with that, but that sounds important and I'm listening. And so let me make sure I do all the right things after we log off today, after we say bye today, and I'll get back to you. I'll make sure we circle back. That just felt so good, because then I could let go of having to always keep track of every single thing and have all this information memorized. And then instead, what becomes far more important is having the right framework, the right lens to catch those flags, to say, oh, this is something they're bringing up that I better keep my eyes open. I better circle back to. I better check in with some colleagues who are more experienced with this particular item and follow through after the fact. And if I need to tell my client that I'm doing that, then I will loop them in as well. And another benefit of this mindset shift that feels worth mentioning is, if I stuck with my old mindset, my anxious mindset that I had to know every single clinical thing ever there could be, then if my client brought up something that felt a little bit less familiar to me and I didn't quite know what to do, or I wasn't 100% sure what to do, but my narrative was that I was supposed to know exactly what to do, then you run the risk of kind of sticking with whatever you think is the most correct answer in that moment, even if you're not totally sure. And you may risk doing something that's actually not correct, or not what most people would do in the situation, or not informed. And so you may actually offer worse clinical care if you have the mindset that you're supposed to know, because I'm supposed to know, so I'm just I must know, and I'm gonna go off of what my mind is telling me should be right. Maybe I think right now, ? Rather than saying, you know what, I'm not totally sure. Let me go double check before I run off and do something, because I don't want to mess this up. But I thought it might be helpful to name a few more ways that this therapist anxiety can show up. But at least for me, the thread for most of them is this pressure of feeling like we're supposed to know what we're doing. We're supposed to be able to fix things for our clients and that sort of thing. Before I share some more examples of how therapist anxiety can manifest, I'd like to thank Powbox for sponsoring today's episode. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I first learned that even with assigned BAA, Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 can't guarantee that 100% of the messages going in and out are HIPAA secure. So without a tool like Powbox operating on the back end, it's almost impossible to stay HIPAA secure unless you forego email altogether. Even if you exclusively use a secure portal to discuss protected health information with your clients, there's still going to be potential clients reaching out initially, and also some clients who will still try to email you because, I don't know, they forgot their password for their portal and they're trying to reach out. So with a tool like Powbox, you can guarantee that every single message is protected. Powbox is super easy to set up, and it's kind of a one and done situation. Like, you just spend a few minutes initially setting it up, and then it's just continuously quietly running in the background. Powbox offers a 14-day free trial to everybody, and they're offering a special discount to Private Practice Skills listeners. Just use coupon code SKILLS at checkout in order to receive $250 off your first year of Powbox. That's Powbox spelled PAUBOX. Thank you again to Powbox for sponsoring this episode. And now on to some more examples of how therapist anxiety can come up. So one really common form of therapist anxiety is believing I need to have all the answers. If there was genuinely someone who had all the answers, they would be God, I guess. A guru? They could charge a lot of money. And there's people who say they have all the answers and charge a lot of money, but usually I'm quite skeptical of that. Maybe that gives you a window into my cynicism. But the good news is, as a therapist, we don't have all the answers because you know what? We're still a human being. We're not God. We're not some, anointed guru. If there is such a thing, I highly doubt it. But we're not. I'm not, at least. So we don't have all the answers, and it wouldn't be helpful for us to try to embody that for ourselves or for our clients. It's much more helpful instead to embrace, of course I don't have all the answers, but I have some clinical skills. I have the ability to be present, hold space, and care for my client. And that is a real human interaction, because no human has the answers. Another way this anxiety can pop up is feeling like we have to always know the right thing to say or communicate very clearly. I was definitely very prone to this. I just thought, I thought I had to have everything right. I had to know exactly what I was doing at all times, including how to string a sentence together the most clear, perfect way. And I've since shifted. And now sometimes it's not that unusual that I will stutter through a couple of sentences with a client thinking I'm saying one thing, and then some other thought interrupts the first sentence I was saying, and it becomes some weird mumbo jumbo that doesn't make any sense. And then because I've embraced that I don't have to have everything perfect and I don't have to know everything and get it just right, then I'll kind of pause, interrupt myself, sometimes kind of laugh about it, genuinely, you know what, that sentence got away from me. Let me start over. Let me try that again. Or I'll say, you know what, the way that I just put that was really wordy. Let me know if I should say that again, because that was probably not as clear as it could have been. And I feel better doing that. It feels more me, because that's how I would talk about it in my personal life too. But it's also mirroring, modeling for our clients, hey, even I'm still a person. Sometimes I don't know how to string words together even. And that's totally fine. We're still here. We're still doing the work. So, it's great for us to model what we want for our clients as well. And if it's more of a clinical thing of not knowing what to say, it's also okay to say nothing. It's okay to say out loud, wow, that was a lot. I almost don't even know what to say. Or you could invite your client to say, oh my goodness, there were so many things going on there. I wonder what it is that you think you might need from me right now. There's a lot of directions you could go aside from I need to know the perfect thing to say, even if you're not totally sure if it's the perfect thing to say, and then saying it, and then maybe that's not necessarily what your client needed, which is also okay. I've done that too. And you just say, oh, looks like that wasn't quite what you needed right now. Let's see if we can try again. And though there are plenty more ways that therapist anxiety can show up, I'll just highlight one more for today's episode. And that's the anxiety that we can feel when our clients are not getting better, or are not getting better quickly enough, or not getting better based on, whatever our stated goals are of what getting better looks like. And this is just one of those tricky things, because therapy being effective, it's just so much more nuanced than here's this client's problem, here's their treatment goal, you apply that intervention, they get better. There are a few things that often will kind of repeat that way, but not the majority of cases, right? Everything is really individualized. So even as I have clients come in, we'll set a treatment plan. And I think I touched on this on a recent episode where I talked about treatment planning in practice, is that the treatment plan often ends up changing once or twice, even in the first few sessions, because the client will come in and say, I need help with this, but then you kind of get into it and realize, oh, there's this whole other thing you didn't even realize was going on that might be more foundational, more important, or more urgent. to address. So let's pivot to a different treatment plan. And often, like, it's not just intervene with this, that, and the other, and then you're all better. Like, that's just not how humans work. And for a lot of healthy healing, there is that sort of like it gets worse before it gets better. So we don't want to dismiss our clients getting worse and just say like, it's part of the process. But a lot of times it really gets messy before it gets better. Like I kind of compare it to, if you've been keeping a lot of things in your home that are cluttering up your space and you hired a professional to come in to help you with those things. And you have to sort of like, for a bit, pull everything out, pull all the stuff that's under your bed and in that closet and shoved in the nooks and crannies and pull it all out and make a bigger mess so that you can genuinely sort through it all over again and then be intentional about deciding like, what do I keep? Does any of this need to stay here? Do I want to like move houses completely? Like really reevaluate the whole thing, but it's got to get messy in order for you to make a genuine kind of intentional choice with all of that. It's much similar with therapy that, I think most of my clients that in the end, I would say like, wow, they really progressed like 180 from where they came over time. It's like, it got worse. It got worse before it got better. It feels worse because we're digging into the crap. That's always one of those like, put your gloves on, buckle up, because it's going to get messy in here. But it's worth it. Okay, I think at some point I lost the plot of what the episode was originally about, that last one. But essentially, embracing that we don't know, I think, helps us be less anxious. We can offer better clinical care. We can course correct. We can model humanity for our clients. We approach our clients more as equals because I'm not all knowing. I don't know all the right answers or exactly what to do all the time. So we might need to collaborate together. I might have to stay curious about what's going on with this client. I might also need to be humble enough to consult, take additional training, make sure I check in even on something as simple as like, let me wait till after session to check back in on the DSM on that thing that I think is flagging, but I'm not 100% before I announce a diagnosis. I think it's a good thing for a lot of reasons, not just the anxiety, but it sure is nice to also not feel anxious. Well, if you are lucky enough to not really relate at all to therapist anxiety, I love that for you. More power to you. But if you're in the boat of feeling anxious maybe more than you'd like to as a therapist, then I hope this episode was helpful to you. At the very least, even if this exact advice isn't what you need precisely, that it could flag for you that, hey, that anxiety is something worth looking into. There might be something underlying that anxiety that needs to be evaluated and maybe corrected, adjusted to be more realistic and more supportive. Well, thanks for joining me. It was another one of those weeks where I had a different video planned and I made this one. That seems to be the theme. Maybe that's just my new thing. I plan a video, spend a long time scripting it, and then I earmark the script for later and potentially never make that episode. And I just make something on the fly that I felt like making. I should think about, maybe that's something I should reflect on. What is that? Anywho, I hope it was helpful to you. Thank you for joining me. And if you are feeling that therapist anxiety, I see you. I have been there and I support you. I hope you find some additional support to help you out with that. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.